let's take some time and get some questions about facts or clarification. I'll start, if I can, with the study committee members and see who may have questions for any of our speakers. We've got Hans.
Hi, Hans Baumann here. I have a question for Masood, and there's a lot of numbers here, so give me a second to find the one I was interested in. Education and health services on slide 10 looked like it grew jobs during the recession and grew a whole lot more jobs regionally, 50,000 jobs regionally after the recession. But in that exact same period, Arlington lost a bunch of jobs. So were we outcompeted at that point by neighboring jurisdictions for that huge chunk of 50,000 jobs, or am I misreading something here?
I'm sorry, let me quickly look at the
yeah,
chart.
sure. Yeah, it was, so basically on slide 10, it shows what looks like education and health services gaining 50,000 jobs after the recession. But
Yes.
then on slide
Yes.
17, it shows Arlington losing 394 jobs in that same sector during that same period, which to me looks like something happened in Northern Virginia that didn't include us.
Yeah, the education health services, actually, it showed a positive growth during a recession. Education obviously includes the employment in public schools, and that was the driver. It really didn't slow down, and it continued to gain during the recovery as we increased high school enrollment, and school enrollment actually grew substantially during the past 5 years.
Now, right. That's at the regional level on slide 10.
That's right.
But when I go to slide 17, I see Arlington, unless there's a mistake on the slide, I see Arlington losing out there to 394 jobs, unless I miss.
Yeah, that's just for Arlington. That's what the data suggests, that during the recession we lost 294 jobs, and that could be the mix of health services in there, not necessarily the education, but you really have to dig it down and break down the sector into the educational services consist of several different sectors that group together. So it's possible that we have lost certain jobs in that sector during the I'm trying to think, during the recovery. Is that during the?
I guess my question was, given that it was such a large driver regionally, it was the second largest driver regionally of new jobs.
Yeah,
we were not included at all in that.
Right.
In fact, we lost jobs. So what?
Yeah, I mean.
What did we do wrong? I guess we hadn't had Victor mesmerize us and get us.
Yeah, I'm not sure really what the answer is, but we can.
Let us take that one back and toss it to the economic development folks, and they'll try to put together an answer for you. Jackie?
Good evening. Yeah, my question is also for Masood, and it's about affordable housing and the the affordable housing gap. My question is, is there a practice of doing the overall income distribution and matching the available housing for different income levels? So you could see, well, maybe there's also a gap in a middle income housing. And how does that relate to matching income distributions with job prospects? So you also talked about, we need to be increasing the income at this level and that level. So I'm wondering what the dynamic interaction is of those two models.
Yeah. Actually, I didn't really talk about increasing. If you're looking at the distribution of industries, jobs by income, you're looking at the mid-income range of around 50,000. That's the starting salary for high-tech positions in most metro area.
I'm just asking if it's possible to see the full model. So we have a lot of discussion that focuses on the gap for a particular income level, but we don't see what the distribution is over income levels.
Yes, yes.
So that's what I'm looking
It is actually
to understand the
yes,
picture.
yes. It is actually possible to break it down. The data actually for this analysis comes from CHAS, and CHAS actually is a database by HUD, and HUD actually aggregates data at those levels. Now you could, in other words, the data is aggregated by 30%, by 50%, and by 80%. They do not provide additional disaggregation of data so that you could get the distribution of income and then figure out what shortage is by what income level. Data is not really as advanced. It is highly aggregated. Now, for this study, I looked at the aggregated data for the county as a whole. It is possible to break down the shortage by either by zip code or by district within the county. That I've done actually back in Maryland. It's possible to do that, or by let's say by census tract, you could do that. But you can't really break it down by income because it is highly aggregated by the source, by the CHAS database.
Thank you.
Okay.
Let's confine questions, at least for the time being, to study group members, and then we'll see if the resident forum's got questions. Sal?
Yeah. Hi, this is Sal Dietrich. Yeah, I had a question, I guess, for Victor. You know, as you're looking at what will be in the next 5 years, the type of businesses we want here, do you have a sense of sort of an anchor tenant, an approach that people sort of know Arlington by? For example, Bethesda's it's the biotech corridor. They got Hopkins pulling in. That's the persona of the folks who live there, and they're very happy with the high-paying jobs and the folks who live there. Do you have a sense of that for Arlington beyond just sort of government or high tech? Yeah.
You know, Arlington has a tremendous advantage in that it has a highly educated workforce, and a lot of these people, a lot of folks, a lot of you in this room, are in the industries which are in high demand: cybersecurity, infotech, data analytics, big data, ed tech, med tech. Those are the industries that we will be pursuing, and not just from the standpoint of established companies that are growing, but also from the entrepreneurial standpoint, because what you really want is you really want business formation. That's really how things exploded in the District of Columbia, through the rapid rate of business formation, but you have to create an environment for that.
Kate Roche, I have a question for Terry. You talked about how for 3 years in a row, average wages have declined in the DC area. Wanted to confirm if that was area median income or what metric that was, and also ask if that trend was anticipated to continue.
That is, oh, I'm sorry. Usually my voice carries pretty well, but in any case, from teaching, that is based on average wage per worker. So the jobs that are, that we have out there and what they're, and so it's salary wages and does not necessarily include benefits. It's just salary and wages. It has been declining, and that kind of, if you will, during that time period, kind of, if you will, in some respects tracks what's happening with federal procurement, as you might think. So, what we're seeing is some declines in higher paying jobs. Now, what we're actually seeing in that is a real kind of diversification. What we've really lost, as suggested by Masoud, is the middle income jobs, is we haven't received back. We've gotten a lot of lower income. I would not be surprised to see that continue to some point. We will kind of catch up, if you will, on averages. It will, I hope, bottom out. But let's take, for an example, what if we have another round of sequestration? That will drive that down even further. I mean, the year that, in Masad's presentation, where he showed the decline in actual gross regional product for this region, was that year where you had a federal government shutdown. I mean, basically you stop 40% of your economy for 16 days or so, you're going to have impact. So that's the message that we're getting to in terms of the desire to diversify this economy, why the focus is not so much on getting another federal agency to relocate to buildings in the Boston corridor, but getting those tech companies. If you will, think of it this way. We have a lot of capacity in this region for our companies that are now selling mostly to government. What if we can get those companies and help them sell to businesses, B2B instead of B2G? But I do think, to indirect answer your question, that it would not be surprising to see that number continue to decline for at least another year.
The aisle that I wouldn't let ask a question a minute ago. Please, if you'd stand up and just introduce yourself both by name and if you're representing a group as a member of the resident forum, what the group is.
Thank you. My name is Jim Burke, and I'm here as a representative of the Arlington Interfaith Council. And I've got a question for you, Victor. It's a two-part question. When I looked at the economic development investment tools, which I agree with, and I agree that bringing these folks in is absolutely critical, what play is the quality of life in Arlington, and what play does education, is that an attractor? And then one related question, and I'm not sure whether this is to you. We talk about the loss of government jobs. What are we doing to look at the transition of the forces that are working for the government, the workforce that's employed by the government or by contractors, and moving into the B2B, as you pointed out there?
Well, in your first question about what role does the educational institutions and the environment and the quality of life play? Huge, very important. But, fortunately or unfortunately, in this region, there's a lot of good places to live. And, they may not have as great of schools as Arlington, but you know what? Montgomery County has pretty good schools. It may not be as safe as, Arlington, but it's pretty safe in Loudoun County. You see, when you start looking at your competitors, that's when it gets, you start losing your advantages. One of the incredible things about Arlington is that it has had this amazing rail access. Well, now that access is going all the way out on a Silver Line, all the way out to the airport. I mean, it's changed. The thing is, what has happened is your competitive environment has changed and you haven't moved. It moved, you didn't. And when things move and you don't, you end up having a BlackBerry and everybody else has an iPhone. I mean, and everybody in this, it's interesting how everyone in this new room knows exactly what that means. I remember a point when if you pulled out a BlackBerry in a meeting, people would turn around and look at you kind of side-eyed and say, is he okay? Because it looks like you're back, with remember the mobile phones? You remember those. Big as a briefcase, right? I mean, that's the thing. You got to move with the times. We haven't moved with the times, so that's the why. That's not as competitive as it was. It's not as important as it was. It's important, but not as important as it was. On your second question on a retraining, we don't have the infrastructure internally to do that retraining, but that is something that is out there and that people are conscious of, and I know that people are doing, but that's not in the portfolio of our economic development department, but it is something that we definitely are very aware of and other people are doing. Veterans Administration and other organizations are out there doing it. Actually, in our region, there are a couple of incubators that have started up specifically focused on vets and providing grants directly to vets for benefits. So that's starting to heat up as an option. You're welcome.
The lady in the brown sweater and again, if you just give us your name and what group you're representing, if you're representing a group.
I'm Lois Kuntz, and I'm not representing any groups. Thank you. I notice in our comparisons of our competitive advantage and so on, we are looking up and down the rail lines, and that leaves out big swaths of Arlington County, and I wonder if we need to think about Arlington a little differently. There are a lot of places that aren't on Metro that might be a lot more competitive cost-wise. Columbia Pike, Lee Highway is undergoing revitalization. Is this something we need to think about as we look at these areas within our county?
That's an excellent point, and one let's hold and ask you to pose that to the table that you're a part of. Or Victor, you want to comment on it at all? Please. I mean, don't let me constrain you.
No, I was just going to say that that is a great point, and what happens is corridors lend themselves to very different types of businesses. So, but it's part of a strategy, and it's a very important part of the strategy. If you look at, and I hate to keep mentioning this, but it's what probably one of the better, more recent examples is in the District of Columbia. They have a Great Streets Corridor program. Now it started with one street, which was H Street. Then it turned to 3. Then it was 7. Now it's a dozen. And what they do is they work with existing businesses, they help them reposition their products and their services, and they recruit other businesses that are complementary. So it can be a great part of a retail strategy. In terms of an office market, that's a great market to bring in millennials because they want things a little funky. They don't want them necessarily all polished, you know, interesting buildings, smaller buildings. So I do think that there is a competitive advantage in doing that, and we should look at that more seriously.
On the back aisle there, and then the gentleman in the...
Connie Erickson, Forest Glen Civic Association. I had a question for Masood on slide 23, and this may be a follow-up information question. Whether you've got the affordable and rental unit information comparison for the region. In other words, how does Arlington compare with the other regional areas, and this may be a development question, how does the affordable housing and rental unit metric affect business development, or does it? So,
actually, these are good questions. Going back to your first question about the comparable metrics. We have looked at the shortage for many years in Maryland. And in fact, I pulled a recent study that I did, it came in the Baltimore Business Journal, Baltimore Business Review for this year, that showed the shortage of affordable and available rental housing units for the entire Maryland and by census tract. So it is available. The data base is available. You could pull data and show where it, in terms of where Arlington ranks, you're looking at, you have to look at the size of the jurisdiction. Arlington County is small relative to other counties in other communities. But the way you can make the metric is look at the shortage per 100 rental households, and I presented that in that chart. That is what you could use to compare Arlington County with other jurisdictions, not the total size of the shortage. So anyways, you have to normalize it, and that's way to normalize it is by looking at per 100 households. Now, I can show that in comparison to, for instance, what happens in Baltimore City and what happens to other jurisdictions that I have done the study before. But in terms of data being readily available, it's not ready. You have to build it. Now, I built that actually for the 8th Congressional District, which includes Arlington. And that data is readily available, and I can make that available to you if you're interested to see, what the shortage is per 100 rental households for the 8th congressional districts. But I want to tell you that Arlington County shortage per 100 rental households is substantially higher than the overall 8th congressional district, which also includes Arlington. Okay. Yeah.
The gentleman on the aisle.
And I'm sorry, going back to your gentleman's question about the difference in what is causing this in Arlington, the education and health services. You remember I put together a chart that shows divided the employment into 3 different effects, and that sector in Arlington is one of the non-competitive sectors. And that really is, what is it now? It's quite possible. I really didn't dig into what are the customers of all these sectors, but it is possible in Arlington some of the customers for instance, certain educational services were federal government agencies or health services, and Arlington's reliance on federal government is significantly above the other metro areas. And that's probably why the comparative advantage is causing a reduction in employment in Arlington significantly higher than what's happening in metro area. That's probably a possible explanation.
My name's Michael Beer. I don't represent anybody here, or any group. I live in Maywood. I'm wondering if we have any data on the number, size, and nature of international businesses here in Arlington.
Yeah, Yeah, there is data. Actually, the Department of Commerce provides that data, and if you'd like it in some form, just let us know, and we can pull that together for you.
Good question. Again, I'd just make sure it gets included in what your table writes down, because we'll capture it that way too. Yes, ma'am.
I'm Sarah Shortall. I don't represent anyone, but I'm from the great neighborhood Civic Association of Waverly Hills, who is the leading civic association on the Lee Highway Alliance. I have a question for Mr. Clower and one for Mr. Hoskins. First for Mr. Hoskins. You talk a lot about drawing millennials here and the things that might interest them. We also have a lot of old people, and our old people have a lot of money. What type of, or have you been thinking about using old people and the businesses they need as an anchor point to try to bring and draw more both residential and business to this area?
First of all, I consider them seasoned, not old. And I am among them. So being among the seasoned, there are things that I like to do. And the interesting thing is that a lot of things that millennials like to do, we like to do. We like to go out to eat. We like to go to interesting music events. We like the arts. So the things that they're consuming, we want to consume, just not the same way. Or at the same time of day, like late at night. We prefer to consume a little earlier. But yes, that is part of a strategy. Actually, if you look at what's going on in the District of Columbia, there are a lot of activities that appeal to what are called the boomers, which is I'm among the boomers, and that is always a great source. But there are no specific things that we've laid out yet, but that is something that we do want to pay attention to. Certainly on the consumption side.
It'd be really great to, for example, see a mixed-use building where, as an old person, I live upstairs and I just have to go down to the first floor to get my eyes checked and my glasses changed, for example. But my question for Mr. Glauer is, you happen to mention that one of the reasons that Virginia was so high on residential real estate as a percentage of total fund revenues was because DC and Maryland had other options. Income tax was one thing you mentioned. Do you happen to have any data, and this would be looking back, on what this balance was like at the height of the car tax? And if the percentage of real estate might have been lower at that point?
Well, I can't answer that off the top of my head, and I'll have to just claim a bit of a newbie on that. There is data that would support that. So again, to repeat kind of what John's been saying, present that question, if you will, and we'll be happy to dig some of that out. That data would exist. I will address something on the, say we call senior workers or people of advanced experience. There are several groups in this region. I spoke to a group that's made up of human resources professionals, and they consider that one of their top priorities of, you have, and let's just say it includes me, the over 50 set, that you're saying, are folks that still have a lot of skills, but are finding things a little bit more difficult. So there are a lot of groups that are looking at that critical advantage that we have, and particularly if you look at the demographics of Arlington County, well positioned in that strength.
I'm going to take one more question, and then I'm going to try to do a little bit of a wrap up and ask people to get up, stretch, walk across the hall, and join the table discussions. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, well, I was very excited to hear about the possibility for all these new businesses coming into Arlington and the millennials and attracting the millennials. So I have a couple of questions about the millennials. First of all, in terms of housing for millennials, if they don't want to buy houses, along Columbia Pike we have a lot of development of affordable housing, but we also have high-end housing, where the apartments are like $3,000 a unit per month. And I'm just wondering, what kind of housing are these millennials going to be attracted to? Are they going to be attracted to like the micro apartments that are going into Crystal City, or are they going to be more likely to really want those high-end units at the Halsted, you know, that have marble bathrooms and you know, the high-end appliances and, you know, the heated floors in their bathrooms and walk-in closets and all that stuff. And the other thing is, millennials are less likely to buy cars. So, and they don't like buses. So I want to ask the question, is the decision to get rid of the streetcar on Columbia Pike and in Crystal City, is that going to be a disadvantage in attracting the millennials and our community, making it an attractive community for their interests?
I'll just jump in, and then Victor, you can add to that. I just want to make a note that I think some of those pieces of information we will be looking at a little bit more in depth at our next meeting, March 11th. We'll have a speaker who's very familiar about the trends of different generations and in this region, how they are, where they're trending to locate, and the types of housing that they are choosing.
Concluded what I think of as sort of part one of tonight's meeting. If I could summarize for everybody where I kind of think we are in the discussion on Arlington's financial issues, we learned a lot at the first meeting about what our budget is comprised of. And one of the essential takeaways from that is the significant role that the real estate tax plays in our overall budget. And from that, the significant role that the commercial sector plays in the real estate tax. Now, commercial sector, as we know, is made up of not just office, but multifamily rental residential, hotel, and retail. And in the aggregate, they're about half, or 51% currently, of our real estate taxes, which has been the underlying key to the Arlington economic model. So the questions that you're being asked to address in light of what you heard tonight about what's happening in the marketplace for office space and what's happening in the marketplace for residential units, the questions are, what do you think, what challenges do you think Arlington faces, and how might they be addressed? Now, nobody's going to have final answers, but we want some good discussion about it and try to get feedback from the members of the resident forum so that the study group can use that, and the subcommittee that's been appointed to talk about these issues can use that feedback to help their deliberations. Before we break, I'd like to introduce a couple of our guests who've been with us all night, learning as we've learned, although I think for them a lot of this is information they already know. Chair of our county board, Mary Hines. I'm not quite sure where he went, but a member of the county board, Jay Fassett, was sitting right there. Is he still there? There he is. All right. Huh? Today is Jay's birthday? No, it's all right. It's all right. We also have a member of the school board, Nancy Van Doren, and the chair of the school board, James Lander. And we have our county manager, Barbara Donnellan, and probably somebody important that I missed. If so, it's my fault. So if you would please get up, stretch, introduce yourself to somebody you don't know, and head off to your tables, and we look forward to the discussions.